This male lead is so weird. After learning that his goddess had transported him to a world, he took a whole bottle of sleeping pills to commit suicide. Seeing the male lead rolled his eyes. The goddess was also terrified. She quickly used detoxification to save him. It turned out that the male lead was a severe depression patient. Originally, he planned to drown himself with his girlfriend, but they had just tied the red rope to their hands. They were hit by a suddenly appearing truck. So after knowing that he was not dead, the male lead would do what he did before. Then, the male lead put another sleeping pill in his mouth and ate it as candy. The goddess was really impressed, asking him to cheer up. After all, he was chosen to be the hero. Because of that truck, was actually their special teleportation device. After all, there are so many unfortunate people in the world, but only those chosen by the truck are qualified to start a new life in another world. So the male lead should be happy. And the male lead, who was still taking sleeping pills, finally understands everything. The happiest time of his life was ruined, all because of that damn truck. And this woman. And she arbitrarily classified him as an unfortunate person, which was simply too arrogant. And this also left the goddess speechless. So in order to cheer up the decadent male lead, the goddess decided to let the male lead see his status bar. Because after every reincarnator is reborn into this world, is given superhuman attributes. However, after seeing the hero's status bar, the goddess was stunned, because the male lead not only has a little health, but also in a poisoned state, and he could die at any time. So, the goddess had to check the other attributes of the male lead. After all, as a hero, must have some special abilities. So, the male lead only had cigarettes, matches, sleeping pills, pens and notebooks. He has no skills or magic. Even the basic attributes of attack and defense speed are also the lowest. The goddess has never seen such a weak reincarnator. There must have been some kind of mistake that made him transferred to this world. Seeing the male lead getting up to leave the temple, the goddess quickly grabbed the male lead. After all, with his weak appearance, he would be eaten by monsters as soon as he went out. However, the male lead told the goddess, and the words of the male lead also made the goddess feel a heartbeat. She used to be proud of guiding adventurers, and was proud of it. Every time she met a reincarnator, it would make her heart beat faster. But recently it's been strange, because the reincarnated people were very unmotivated. So the goddess gradually became a woman who only says fixed lines. But the male lead made his long dead heart come back to life. Seeing that the male lead was about to leave, the goddess asked him to choose a profession before leaving. To Katie, Mimi will die if I'm too old. After the male lead left the temple, he only saw a road sign. He heard a system prompt in his ear. Congratulations, you have discovered the first sight plane, and gain 5 experience points, and level up to level 2. And at this moment, a big tree behind the male protagonist suddenly fell down, which was a trap set by the tree demon. A passing Caternang happened to step on it. Seeing the male lead, Meower also seemed to see a savior, asking the male lead to quickly find a way to save her. Secretly watching. Oh no, and both of them will die soon. Then, the tree demon also used its unique absorption skill, and began to absorb the life force of the two in less than 2.5 minutes. They will die. Seeing this, the male protagonist was also very happy. Now he could finally die as he wished. However, at this moment, the toxins in the male lead's body were sucked out by the tree demon. Seeing this, the tree demon quickly stopped absorbing. However, even so, it couldn't stop the spread of the toxin. The tree demon was poisoned to death by the male lead. However, the rescued Caternang was confused until he saw the still alive male lead. Did he understand everything? She thought the male lead was deliberately caught by the tree demon to use the toxins in his body to poison the tree demon. But the male protagonist told the cat woman this was the 5th time he had failed to die, and his sad look also made the cat-eared girl feel sympathetic. Although she didn't know why he was so sad, but he was her savior after all. So she invited the male lead to her house, and wanted to take the opportunity to thank him. However, when the cat-eared girl took the man's hand, the male lead noticed the rope on his hand. This instantly reminded him of Xiaoqi who was going to die with him. Could it be that? Did she also come to this world with him? Thinking of this, the male lead walked towards the temple again, planning to ask the goddess about Xiaoqi. If he could find Xiaoqi, he could die with Xiaoqi again. Meanwhile, the goddess was also praying for the male lead, hoping that the male lead could survive in the other world and reunite with him again. And at this moment, the male lead also pushed the door and came in. The goddess didn't expect her wish would come true so soon, but when she excitedly ran towards the male lead, she saw the cat lady following the male lead. You just want to know where to lose. Actually, you can go to Thailand this year. But unfortunately, the goddess has never seen Xiaoqi, so Maornyang decided to take the male lead to the town ahead. However, as soon as she held the man's hand, she was interrupted by the goddess who was chasing. Maornyang was speechless. She didn't understand why the goddess left the temple. Hearing this, the goddess also shyly looked at the male lead. However, while they were arguing, the male lead walked towards the damaged carriage. It turned out that he found a bed that suited him very well. Then the male lead told them that he had a headache and wanted to take a nap and wake him up when they reached the town. Seeing this, the goddess couldn't help mocking Maornyang and then dragged the male lead's bed towards the town. This male lead is so weird. The sleeping pills that can kill people if taken too much. He ate them as candy, and he ate a bottle at a time. He used it as a coffin for the dead. He used it as a bed. After being transported to another world, he thinks about how to die every day, but he always fails to die. And the male lead's melancholy temperament also successfully captured the hearts of 2 harem members and are willing to work for him, and became the transportation for the male lead. The first thing the priest did after bringing the hero to the city is to take the male lead, who is a hero, to meet the king. And the king generously let them live in the palace. However, but the condition is that the hero tells him an adventure story. Seeing this, the priest quickly changed the subject and praised the princess's beauty, and this also touched the king's heart. Then he called in 2 of his favorite sons-in-law, saying that the princess was getting married soon, but the king didn't know which of the 2 he should choose, so he wanted to hear the man's opinion. However, when faced with a choice between 2, the male lead chose the third answer, ex-boyfriend. The male lead thought, this kind of thing should be based on the princess' opinion, rather than the king's unilateral decision. So whether as a father or a king, the king was unqualified. He doesn't deserve to sit on the throne at all. After speaking, he ignored the stunned king. The male lead turned around and left. Seeing this, the priest and the cat girl also quickly apologized to the king. Fortunately, the king was quite magnanimous and didn't take it to heart. However, these words deeply touched the princess. At night, the male protagonist who couldn't sleep was sitting by the bed, staring out the window in a daze. The priest suddenly woke up. Seeing that the male lead hadn't slept yet, the priest also curiously asked the male lead why he still wasn't asleep. Hearing this, the priest couldn't help but sympathize with him. But what he was more curious about was who the Xiaoqi the male lead mentioned before was. However, before the male lead could answer, a cat's tail came out of the male lead's quilt. The male lead was speechless. Then he walked out of the door to get some air. But he happened to meet the princess, who was preoccupied. But seeing such a beautiful scenery, the male lead couldn't help but exclaim. The male lead asked the princess not to be surprised, because it's already his norm. Instead, the princess looked like she had troubles. Hearing this, the princess also told the man her worries, saying that he still couldn't decide who to marry. One is a brave knight, who is deeply trusted by his father, and the other is his childhood sweetheart. Whenever she was sad, he would bring new poems to comfort himself. So it's hard for him to make a choice. But the male lead told the princess what the future path should not be decided by others, but to listen to his heart. So what the princess should do at this time is to ask herself what she really expects. Then the male lead left. And these words also successfully touched the princess's heart. The next day, the king also called them over and told them that the princess had made a decision and wanted them to be witnesses. Then the king asked the princess stand in front of the person she chose. to reveal his answer to everyone. But what no one expected was that the princess chose the male lead. Xin Yin Research Panda. New research. This was the decision the princess had thought about all night. Although the bard would comfort her when she was sad, but when she wasn't sad, he would also come to play poems. He often woke her up from her sweet dreams. So, she just wanted to find someone to publish her new work. As for the knight, it was because of a strange smell on him, which made the princess a little unacceptable. And most importantly, she didn't want to get married at all. It was the king who forced her to marry. No one has ever cared about her feelings. Only the male lead was willing to understand her wishes and respected her choice. So he gave up marriage and planned to die with the hero. But at this moment, the knight next to her took off his helmet. It turned out that the knight was disguised by the demon lord's army. His purpose was to marry the princess after becoming the king and dedicate the country to the demon lord. But unexpectedly, the princess recognized his identity and smelled the demon smell on him. The Minotaur had to kill everyone and forcibly seized the throne. At this time, the soldiers also rushed towards the Minotaur, but the Minotaur only needed one hit and scattered them. And the cat girl who was providing wake-up service for the coffin was also implicated. Then, the angry cat girl also decided to have fun with the Minotaur. And the bard also stood out at this time. Seeing the other party's level of 89, Maomei thought he was going to buff her. But nothing happened. The cat girl was speechless. It was just a song. But what made the cat girl even more speechless was the male lead actually listened to it with a fascinated look. The cat girl was also very helpless, so she had to bite the bullet and fight the Minotaur. After all, on the field now, the only one who still has some combat power. However, with cat girl's little skill, she was no match for the Minotaur. Soon, the cat girl was scratched by the bull's foot. Seeing this, the Minotaur also became arrogant. But just as he was about to end the cat girl's life, the male lead spoke up, saying that if he wanted to kill, he should kill him and the princess first. Anyway, they were going to die together. Killing them would be a good deed. Hearing this, the Minotaur was also stunned. This was the first time someone had made such a request. The king was speechless. Why did a good wedding day suddenly turned into a funeral day? The Minotaur also agreed to the man. Of course, he would still kill everyone later. Then he was ready to stab them with his horns. Although the male protagonist didn't care about this, the princess was a little shaken. Seeing the bull's horn getting closer and closer to her, the princess finally mustered up the courage. She said she didn't want to die with the male lead. After all, as a princess, she still has to protect the people of this country, so she can't die now. When the male lead heard the princess finally saying her mind, he also pushed her away. After all, in the male lead's heart, the only one who can die with him is Xiaoqi. However, when the male lead was ready to face death alone, the priest finally woke up, and then used the barrier skill to protect the male lead. A smile. And after defeating the bull, after defeating the Minotaur, the two who had always been at odds finally reached a reconciliation. Seeing this scene, the bard also stood out again, and planned to play a song for them. But the cat girl was very disgusted. What happened today also made the king deeply realize his mistake. He felt that he was not worthy to be a king, so he passed the throne to the princess. As for the male lead, he continued to lie in the coffin, and left the city with his two concubines. Music, gotta know I say that I've got a job. Excuse me, more than that. Others want to be heroes when they are reborn in another world. But the male lead just wants to be a dead person. Every day he lies in the coffin thinking about how to die. But such a severely depressed male lead. He made the god in charge of receiving the transmigrators quit willingly, and became a slave to pull the non-Jewish coffin. However, when Genie and Timera were pulling the male lead to other temples to find the whereabouts of the male lead's girlfriend, a dragon blocked their way. Seeing this, Genie and Timera were also confused. They didn't understand why the strongest monster appeared here. Just then, a cloaked woman slowly walked over, and she calmed down the ferocious dragon in a few words. Seeing that she could tame the dragon, Genie and Tammy were also curious about her identity. However, the girl warned them that there are many demons nearby, so they'd better leave here quickly. What's more, they have already suffered casualties. Oh, what a pity. This beauty might follow them. Oh, what a pity. However, when she heard that the male lead was a transmigrator, the girl immediately changed her face and planned to kill the male lead directly, because she hates these people from other worlds the most. Bah! She directly fired a laser cannon at them. Genie barely blocked it with her shield. It didn't last for 2.5 seconds. Her shield was shattered by the laser. But this attack also seriously injured Genie and Tammy. But seeing the girl who was still approaching step by step, they stood up again. They couldn't let the girl hurt the male lead. However, the girl just with a glance, with invisible pressure, making them kneel on the ground and unable to move. Seeing the mark on the girl's neck, Genie finally knew the girl's identity, because it was the mark that belonged to the devil. In other words, the girl in front of them was the final boss of the world. Just when Genie and the other two felt desperate, the male lead finally stood up. He asked the girl to kill him and let them go. Anyway, he was going to die anyway. Killing him would be doing a good deed. Hearing this, the girl didn't waste any words. She directly stabbed the male lead in the stomach. After the male lead fell to the ground, the girl also turned around and left. And Genie Tammy, who had no strength left, could only watch the girl leave. But at this moment, the male lead stood up again. He told the girl that he once had the idea of stabbing someone, but he only sent a threatening letter to a threatening level. The reason why the male lead told the girl this was to prevent the girl from losing herself due to hatred. He could clearly see the sadness in her eyes. Hearing this, the girl was also a little flustered and hurriedly rode the dragon to leave here. At this moment, she was completely confused. She didn't understand what the male lead meant. It seems that the harem will have another member. As for the 3 injured people, were taken to other temples by the demon of Kini. With the help of the priest of this temple, they managed to save their lives. However, the first thing the male lead did after recovering, he went to the town to buy a bottle of poison. Without waiting for the boss to finish introducing the use, the male lead directly drank it in one gulp. After being rescued by the goddess, the toxins in his body were cleared. Now he naturally needs to replenish them. Seeing that the male lead had fully recovered, Genie also asked the priest about the whereabouts of the male lead's girlfriend. However, the priest had never heard of Xiaoqi. Compared with these, the priest cared more about the fact that Kini was a priest. Why would she mix with an otherworldly person? It turns out that this priest hated the transmigrators very much, because they always rely on the abilities given by the gods to do whatever they want. While the priest was complaining to Kini, a living example stood out. However, Kini said that the male lead was different, because if it weren't for the male lead, there wouldn't be her now. It was the male lead changed his life that was static in the past. Seeing Genie's infatuated look, the priest as her best friend was helpless. So she warned Genie to stay away from him, because his face, it's obvious that he has a destructive personality. If she stays with him, Genie would be ruined by the male lead sooner or later. While they were talking, the male lead also came over, asking Genie for money to buy poison. Seeing that Genie didn't care about anything, and directly took out money, the priest was really impressed. She didn't expect that Genie had fallen so low. The priest was also curious what kind of charm the male lead has. That made Genie so devoted to him. So Genie told the priest that the male lead had just to protect them from the demon lord, and told him. Hearing this, the priest was completely confused what Genie was talking about, because the demon lord was killed by other reincarnators, had been killed by other reincarnators, and in the Demon King city at this time, after the hero defeated the demon lord, remained in the demon lord city, tormenting the demon lord's mount. GG. Then Genie also told Tammy about it, and this also made Tammy very happy. Now the world is finally at peace. As for who the girl was, they didn't bother to care. Anyway, the demon lord is dead, as one of the heroes, so he doesn't need to defeat the demon king. And the male lead was also too lazy to think about it. At this time, he was worried about not having inspiration. Seeing this, Genie quickly suggested to the male lead, why not write their adventure into a book? Compared to Genie's story, the male lead thought that The encounter with the demon girl made his inspiration flow like a spring. If only more similar things happened. Hearing this, Kimi also suggested the male lead to go shopping, and she had something to buy for the male lead. Then she took the male lead to the street and bought him a suit of armor and wrapped him up. After all, who would suddenly attack at any time? Then Kimi put a helmet on the male lead, leaving him alone, and went shopping with Tai Mei. Soon, a passing priest also noticed the male lead. So when Genie was not around, the priest also advised the male lead to remove Kimi, because as a priest, with a reincarnator, something unfortunate will happen sooner or later. However, in the face of the priest's request, the male lead chose to laugh it off. After all, Kimi is not a caged bird. He didn't want to interfere in others' lives. Hearing this, the priest was also a little angry, but just as he was about to reprimand the male lead, the previous rapper and another transmigrator were giving speeches in the square nearby, announced to the citizens that the demon lord had been defeated by them. And hearing the cheers from below, Huang Mao got to the point, saying that the peace in their world was all thanks to them. It was all thanks to them, the reincarnators. So he wants to start a new era where they reincarnators rule the world. And the first step is to rule this town. At this moment, the rapper also noticed Ji Mi and Tai Mei in the crowd. Tianxia Bugu, Iko Yun. The ability of this yellow-haired man is really amazing. No matter what creature, as long as he touches their head, they will become his slaves. And the simpler the object's mind is, the faster the skill takes effect. Seeing the rapper touching Ji Mi, Tai Mei couldn't stand it anymore. But just as Tai Mei was about to punch him, a pair of palms were placed on his head. So Tai Mei also became the slave of the yellow-haired. Seeing the yellow-haired man a hero abuse his power, the priest who led him couldn't stand it anymore, saying they would never surrender to the yellow-haired. Hearing this, the people around also expressed their agreement. Seeing this, the yellow-haired man's face darkened. Since you don't want to submit to me, then I will destroy the entire kingdom, and then create a new kingdom. He ordered his minions to charge towards them. And the yellow-haired man took advantage of the chaos, planning to use it as his future castle. On the other side, Tammy was frantically attacking the male protagonist wrapped in armor. The male lead was also very speechless about this. Sure enough, what Genie said was right. He didn't know when he would be attacked by someone. Just as the male lead was lamenting, Tai Mei was hit by the helmet that she punched away, was reflected back, and hit his head. Then the male lead put Tai Mei into a barrel. The barrel marked with a note about female cats. The priest was also knocked to the male lead's side. Seeing this, the male lead couldn't help but make a joke. He didn't expect they would meet again so soon. Ignoring the male lead's words, the priest instead told the male lead the story of the yellow hair. It turned out that when the yellow-haired man first came to, he was a cowardly and honest person. But after gaining the God-given plug-in ability, he suddenly became arrogant and domineering. Hearing this, the male protagonist also became interested. As a writer, he felt that Huang Mao gave him great inspiration for writing, so he decided to go to the temple to meet the yellow-haired, and planned to create a work with him as the protagonist. The priest was helpless about this, so he could only follow the male lead, because he knew that the male lead had no superpowers. Going alone would only lead to death. Then, after the two arrived at the temple, the priest also told the male lead about the yellow-haired man's ability, and then asked the male lead what his battle plan was. While they were talking, the male lead also took out a bottle of poison. Seeing this, the priest breathed a sigh of relief. It seems that the male lead is not a reckless fool. The priest was really impressed. He had to bite the bullet and follow the male lead into the door. After learning that the male lead was going to write a novel, Huang Mao initially thought that the male lead was flattering him to praise him, but he didn't expect the male lead was simply interested in his experience of indulging in desires and falling. For the yellow-haired man, this was an insult, so he planned to directly execute the male lead. Seeing the wolves rushing over, the male lead was still taking notes seriously. The priest was speechless, so he pushed the male lead aside to deal with the wolves. But while the priest was being held back by the wolves, Huang Mao controlled the wolf and used a fireball to aim at the man beside him. At this time, the priest had no time to care about the male lead. Just at the critical moment, a helmet suddenly appeared in front of the male lead, and the one controlling the helmet was Keeney's familiar. The male lead remembered that Genie had said that the helmet could reflect primary magic. Then the yellow-haired man asked Rapper to calm down, because those were just appetizers. After saying that, he let the wolf behind him pounce on the male lead. However, the male protagonist's body is highly poisonous. The Wolf King bit the male lead on the shoulder, and soon died from the 600 points of poison, and collapsed to the ground. Now the priest also understands why the male lead drank poison. Seeing the male lead was so awesome, the rapper was also scared and turned to run away. However, the yellow-haired man didn't plan to admit defeat, because he still had Genie as his last trump card. Then the yellow-haired man handed Genie a short knife, asking her to kill the priest and the man, because they were comrades. The priest couldn't attack Genie either, so he had to let the male lead leave first. But unexpectedly, the male lead just smiled faintly, and then came directly to Kimmy's side, because he knew that Kimmy was not a weak woman. How could she be willing to be a slave to the yellow-haired? Hearing this, the yellow-haired man also smiled, because his ability is unsolvable. Kimmy Kago. How could she be willing to be a slave to the yellow-haired? Duck. Jean and I. Ginny couldn't stop shaking the hand holding the knife. She ignored the order to kill the male lead. She directly raised her short knife and stabbed herself in the thigh. The pain also made Jean and I regain consciousness. Seeing this, the blonde-haired man completely broke down. Unexpectedly, his ability was actually removed. So without any means, the yellow-haired man picked up the knife and prepares to kill himself. However, the male lead stopped him, because if he kills himself now, it would be very troublesome for the male lead. After all, his novel has not been completed yet. Circasi Taimai Kimi no Star Noro Noa de Rio. In desperation, Huang Mao also told the male lead his story. In school, Huang Mao was like a dog. He was bullied and laughed at by his classmates. However, after being transported to another world by a portal, all of this changed. After discovering he had the ability to enslave all creatures, Huang Mao also stopped eating beef. As long as someone dares to provoke him, he would make them his slaves. Become a hero. Save the world. Save the world. He was a coward who had been bullied before. Suddenly gained superpowers. How could he possibly save this strange world? After hearing the story of the yellow-haired man, the male lead also showed a satisfied smile. The novel based on the yellow-haired man was finally done. The male lead only had one comment. Then a magic circle appeared under the yellow-haired's feet. And this magic circle, for those who are responsible for receiving the reincarnators, for Genie and the priest, is very familiar, because this is the magic circle to summon the reborn. Then, in the shocked eyes of Kaini and the priest, the yellow-haired man also disappeared into the magic circle. Seeing this, Genie and the priest were also dumbfounded. They didn't expect that the male lead's ability was reverse teleporting the reincarnator, and Genie also found that the male lead has awakened a skill of a storyteller. But in a blink of an eye, the skill disappeared again. From the triggering condition, it was obvious that the male lead's skill is a special skill specifically for transmigrators. Thinking of this, the priest immediately understood everything. The male lead must have been chosen by the gods to fight against these evil reincarnators, that he was chosen by the gods to be reborn. After the yellow-haired man was teleported back, the demons who were besieging the villagers also woke up one after another, and then turned around and left the town back, and returned to the forest. Tai Mei, who was locked in the barrel, also woke up. However, the words "watch out for the fierce cat" on the barrel made Tai Mei a little angry. Then the male protagonist asked the priest for a new coffin, and planned to leave the city. And before leaving, the priest also asked Genie to protect the male lead, because now the devil is dead. There must be many reincarnators who abuse their abilities. So the male lead's ability will play a crucial role in the future world. Then when saying goodbye, the priest also asked about the yellow-haired man. And everything was as the male lead expected. Huang Mao returned to the real world, although he was still as cowardly as ever, and chose to drop out. But the only thing to be glad about is, he successfully found a job, and start over. This male lead is so weird. Others are terrified when they are aimed at by bows and arrows, while our male lead is happy to death, and even asked the other to aim at his heart. It turns out that the male lead himself suffered from severe depression, but he couldn't die even though he wanted to. So he lies in the coffin all day, and regarded himself as a dead person. He was dragged around by two girls in a different world. One day, when Jinny and Taimai pulled the male lead to a village, a guy named Akun stopped them, because they were pulling a coffin. Akun thought they were in danger during an adventure, so he wanted to provide them with a bodyguard service. And it only costs 40,000 yuan. He could introduce them to a warrior from another world as their bodyguard. In this way, they would be much safer when traveling in the future. Taimei was also speechless, because from the two transmigrators, the blonde and rapper, the transmigrators he introduced were probably not good. But just as Taimei was about to refuse, Jinny took out the money directly. Seeing this, Taimei was really convinced. How could she trust this little kid so easily? And seeing that Jinny had been taken in, he quickly said that the money was worth it. After all, someone in their team had already died. With the addition of a hero, this kind of thing would never happen again. Then Taimei also told Akun, but Akun refused to believe it. After all, how could a hero look like half dead? Then Akun took Jinny's money, and told them the hero would come to the hotel to find them later. Then he said goodbye to them. However, Jinny waited in the hotel until night, but the hero Akun mentioned didn't show up. And after the hotel owner learned of the situation, he also told Jinny that she had been deceived. It turned out that Akun was a famous liar in the village, often using the guise of a hero to deceive outsiders. Hearing this, Jinny was instantly furious. She was worthy of being a goddess with a brain. As for Akun's deception, the villagers have also educated him many times. But Akun was an orphan since he was a child, and no one in the village could control him, so they were helpless. On the other hand, Akun had just wiped his beloved big sword, and was about to sleep with his beloved sword. A cloth suddenly covered his face from behind. When he woke up again, the three people who kidnapped him were already dividing his money. Seeing this, Akun was also very angry. He said that if something happened to him, his reincarnated partner would not let them go. But hearing this, they laughed, because the three of them were the reincarnators mentioned by Akun. The reason why they came to Akun was because he used their names as heroes to cheat everywhere. After saying that, the man pointed the bow and arrow at Akun. However, just as the three were about to punish Akun for justice, the male protagonist suddenly appeared and let the man with the sword shoot the Iron Man's foot. At this time, the green-eyed man also saw through his ability. The male protagonist was also a transmigrator, but strangely, the male lead had no abilities, and even only 1 point of health, and was also in a state of poisoning. Hearing this, the sword man also breathed a sigh of relief. He thought the male lead was so powerful. It was just bluffing. Then he raised his crossbow, and was ready to kill the male lead. Hearing the word death, the male lead instantly changed his face, and his health value kept rising. Now it's the swordsman and the green-eyed man's turn. They didn't expect to meet a lunatic. After driving away the few people, the male lead also advised Akun, and asked him to find a serious job, and stop living by deceiving people. After saying this, the male lead left directly and smartly. Seeing this, Akun was also confused. The male lead left without helping him untie the rope. The next day, Jinny and Taimei were about to take the male lead out of the village. They also found that the male lead, who couldn't sleep, was actually dozing off today. Now Kini couldn't help but suspect that. Could the male lead have snuck out to find a woman last night? While he was going crazy, Akun also came over. Seeing the liar had the face to come over, Taimei was also instantly furious. But just as he was about to teach Akun a lesson, Akun told him that he was not lying, because he was the hero they were going to introduce. In this way, Akun also became a member of the protagonist's team. On the other hand, the priests in charge of guiding the reincarnators also held a meeting in the central temple, because the demon lord had been defeated by the hero. The Pope have lifted the magic circle connecting the one world. decided not to summon new reincarnators in the future. Although this is the case, their future work will become very easy, but now a new problem has arisen. The 7 reincarnators who defeated the Demon Lord now occupy the Demon Lord's territory and issued a declaration to the world. They plan to use the power given by the gods to rule the world. In other words, the current heroes have become the new demons, and this meeting is to discuss, to deal with these fallen heroes. Hearing this, the priest also remembered the male lead, because he saw with his own eyes. The male lead sent the yellow-haired hero back to his world. Perhaps his ability to send reincarnators back to their original world is the only hope to save this world. Hearing this, the Pope, who had not appeared, also walked out, asking the priest to elaborate on the male lead. On the other hand, the male protagonist didn't know that he had become the savior of this world. He didn't even know that the girlfriend he was looking for is also one of the 7 heroes who defeated the Demon Lord. He only knew that after waking up in the coffin, he was pulled by 3 people to a new city, and this is Tai Mei's hometown. But Genie found that the guards of this city seemed a bit strict, and it seemed that it was not easy to enter. Wen Yan's beauty reassured Genie, because she was somewhat famous here, and they all know him. She could enter by showing her face. However, after the guards saw Tai Mei, immediately took out weapons and surrounded them. With Tai Mei's fame, they were directly imprisoned. Genie, don't worry. Genie, don't worry. This male lead is so weird. Others are afraid to be locked up in prison to death. But the male lead who wanted to die was very happy, thinking of all kinds of torture, and even unconsciously laughed. Akun was also quite speechless about this. He didn't want to wait for death here, so he used wire to pry open the prison door. Seeing this, the male lead quickly stopped Akun, asking him to close the door quickly, because he hasn't experienced what the death penalty feels like. Akun was really speechless, but while he was complaining, the noise also caught the attention of the guards. Before they could escape, the 3 were caught again. However, what the male lead cared about was, but this was not up to the guards to decide, so they took the 3 to the king, asking the king to convict them, and the king thought they deserved to die, because kidnapping the princess was a capital crime. Just as Genie was wondering, when they kidnapped the princess, Tai Mei also walked in. It turned out that Tai Mei was the princess of this country. But after Tai Mei explained the situation to the king still wanted to execute the 3. The purpose is to keep Tai Mei from running around again, and stay in the palace obediently, and be a good princess, and said that if Tai Mei agreed, he would release the 3 men. So in order to save the 3's lives, Tai Mei had to agree to the king. After thanking the 3 for their care along the way, Tai Mei left with a sad face. And the king kept his promise and released the 3. But while Genie and Akun were celebrating their meal, the male lead was a little depressed. He looked a little depressed. He was crazy taking sleeping pills. And Genie was also a little emotional. She didn't expect that Tai Mei was a princess. She realized she had done so many unreasonable things to her. The conversation of several people was also heard by the waitress. After learning that they were Tai Mei's friends, the waitress quickly said she had been by Tai Mei's side as a maid for a period of time. She wanted to inquire about Tai Mei's recent situation. However, after learning that Tai Mei was forcibly taken back to the palace, the waitress looked a little sad. Seeing this, the male protagonist, who is a writer, was also interested. It seems that he knew about Tai Mei and the king, so he asked the lady to tell him their story, and wanted to use it as a basis to create a novel. Meanwhile, when Tai Mei looked at the moon and missed the male lead, she found a figure on the opposite rooftop. An unknown figure appeared on the roof. Just as Tai Mei was puzzled, a big mouth suddenly appeared out of thin air and bit a big hole in the palace roof. When the king came over, a red-haired man was also sitting on the throne waiting for him. He was one of the 7 heroes who defeated the Demon King. All of this was his plan. As for his purpose of coming here, was to devour this country to the end, and taste the taste of female orcs. Hearing this, the king's soldiers immediately took up a fighting stance. After all, this is a country of martial arts. How could they allow him to be so presumptuous? He rushed towards Hung Mao. However, Hung Mao was very calm. After swallowing the soldier, Hung Mao just chewed a few times. He immediately spit it out. Although his ability is gluttony, he is very picky about the ingredients. These muscular soldiers tasted hard and dry, and were hard to swallow. Seeing this, the king knew that these soldiers were no match for Hung Mao, and let them back. Then the king also removed the shackles on his body, and planned to let Hung Mao taste the power of his beast god fist. Seeing this, Hung Mao also became interested. Then he directly used his ability. He slashed at the king with his ability, and the king was indeed capable. He kicked the mouth away with one kick. He directly dodged and came to Hung Mao's front. Seeing this, the king was also a little confused. He didn't expect that his palm did not hurt the other party at all. Hung Mao said that if it was him before, at that moment, he would have died. But unfortunately, he had eaten a lot of stone men the other day, so his body became much harder. Hearing this, the king also removed the weight from his arm, and intended to use his ultimate move, and seriously punch and kill Hung Mao. However, just as the king was about to strike, Tai Mei who came interrupted them. Seeing this, the red-haired man also became excited. The delicious food was delivered to him automatically, and Tai Mei recognized the man who just stood on the roof. So he immediately tore off the skirt of Aishi, and was ready to help his father. But the king stopped Tai Mei, because in his eyes, this is not a place for women and children to appear. He thought Tai Mei couldn't replace his brother, her brother Leo's. Hearing this, Tai Mei also fell into painful memories, and the other girl also told the male lead about Yuan Wei. It turns out that Tai Mei has a twin brother, and the king has always regarded his brother as his successor, because of an accident 10 years ago, killed his brother and mother, and the king has been depressed since then. So in order to cheer the king up, Tai Mei cut her long hair, and intends to replace her brother as the father's heir. However, as a warrior, the king could not abandon the idea that women are inferior. Thinking Tai Mei couldn't replace his brother, Yu Shu, a huge gap emerged between them. For her father's prejudice, Tai Mei was very dissatisfied, so she directly ignored her father's advice, and rushed towards Hung Mao. Although the king came in time at the critical moment, pushed Tai Mei away, but his fist was also eaten by the red hair. And after seeing the finger in Hung Mao's mouth, Tai Mei finally realized it. However, the angrier Tai Mei became, the more excited Hung Mao became. But just as he was about to enjoy the delicious food that came to him, the minister suddenly rushed over, knocked Tai Mei out and took her away. And Hung Mao didn't go after him. The old one is still here. The younger one will definitely come back. Besides, he has more important things to do now. On the other hand, after hearing the story of Tai Mei and the king, the male protagonist also left the restaurant. Just then, the minister also rushed over with Tai Mei. But just as the minister explained the situation to everyone, there was another loud noise in the palace. Hung Mao blasted a big hole in the palace as a podium, bringing the seriously injured king. He delivered a speech to all the orcs, saying that he would rule the country from now on. Men will continue to work hard, while women, they would be kept as food and raised in captivity, and eat them one by one. As soon as he said this, someone immediately disagreed, and threw stones at the red-haired man. And his fate was predictable. Hung Mao directly ate him in one bite. Then, Hung Mao also felt that he was a bit biased towards women, saying that if a man was willing to be eaten, he would be okay with it. After all, they must also want to be with their families, reunite with their families in his stomach. Hearing this, everyone was scared and fled. With the previous example, no one dared to resist, and Hung Mao didn't care about them. Anyway, he had already surrounded the place with monsters. They couldn't escape even if they wanted to. After listening to Hung Mao's speech, the male protagonist also decided to meet Hung Mao in person. So he took Genie and Akuan, and went straight to the palace. Seeing the ogre guarding the gate, Kini was going to break in, but was stopped by the male lead. Then he said they came here to be eaten. Hearing this, Wen Yen was not only beautiful, Akun was dumbfounded, and even the two ogres were confused. They didn't expect someone would be so perverted, willing to be eaten voluntarily. so they had to put them in the cell first, and then report to Hongmao. But this time, the male lead didn't come to die. After the ogres left, the male lead took out the wire from Akun's hat, asking Akun to open the door of the cell, and planned to start the next step. On the other hand, the minister just went to bring Tai Mei a bowl of porridge, but found that Tai Mei was gone. It's obvious that he must have gone to seek revenge on Hongmao. This Hongmao has a gluttonous skill that can become stronger by eating people. As long as he can eat the meat of the other person, he can learn the other skills. Seeing his father's arm being eaten by the man, Tai Mei vowed to kill Hongmao for revenge. Seeing this, Hongmao also decided to give Tai Mei a gift. Then he kicked the ogre on the ground towards Tai Mei. While Tai Mei was distracted, Hongmao used Tai Mei's father's unique skill and hit Tai Mei to the wall with one blow. Seeing that the other party could use his father's unique skill, Tai Mei was also full of disbelief. Seeing this, Hongmao also proudly explained his skills to Tai Mei. Next, what he was going to do was to use Tai Mei's father's unique skill to dismember Tai Mei and eat him. Sir Dino Hazimal. On the other side, the male lead also brought Kini and Akun to the princess's room. Seeing this, Genie was also confused. She didn't understand why the male lead, why he brought them here. But the male lead didn't explain anything. He asked Akun to use a wire to open the locked drawer. And after seeing the diary inside, the male lead also showed a satisfied smile. The original intention of the male lead was to learn about Tai Mei's past, and then create a novel with Tai Mei as the protagonist. He didn't know that Tai Mei was being brutally raped by Hongmao. Although Tai Mei knew very well she was no match for the red-haired man, she still struggled to stand up again, because if it were his late brother, he would never give up. Seeing Tai Mei like this, Hongmao was also very excited, because only by eating this living flesh can he feel the reality of being alive. He even felt that the sad days of his past life were all for this moment. In the past world, Hongmao was still a rich kid and lived in a castle-like house. Whatever he wanted, his parents would buy them for him. He ate delicacies every day, but red hair felt more and more empty inside. So in order to find the real sense of living, Hongmao suddenly had the idea of eating people. But in the end, his idea was not realized. After all, eating people is too perverted. Even if his parents spoiled him, would not fulfill his wish. Although people say he is the happiest person in the world, but Hongmao felt he is the most unfortunate person in the world. While Hongmao was thinking like this, a transporter from another world suddenly appeared and took him to this world. In this world, his wish to eat people was finally fulfilled. Zhou took the opportunity to use his ability and rushed towards Tai Mei. But luckily, at the critical moment, the male lead appeared in time, stood in front of Tai Mei. However, seeing the male lead suddenly appear and the stopped mouth, Hongmao also felt very strange, because his ability had failed for the first time. Seeing that no matter how he snapped his fingers, he couldn't make his mouth bite the male lead, Hongmao also became curious about the male lead. At this time, Jinny, who came, also asked the male lead to use his ability to expel the evil transmigrator, Red Hair, from this world. However, the male lead thought that the self-proclaimed unfortunate and boring life of Red Hair was not worth writing about. Hongmao's face immediately turned gloomy. Then he directly activated the time-telling ability and prepared to kill everyone. But the male lead didn't care at all. Then he came to Tai Mei's side and gave him the novel he wrote for Tai Mei. Then, pages recording Tai Mei's past surrounded Tai Mei. And this was the special skill of the male lead, the storyteller. It turns out that the male lead's ability was not just to send the transmigrators back to their world, but also the ability to strengthen his teammates. Looking at these past memories and the male lead's words, Tai Mei finally solved her knot. It turns out that Tai Mei has been struggling whether to be the ideal princess in her father's eyes, or inherit the throne from her deceased brother, or inherit the throne and live on. And what the male lead wants to tell her is, she doesn't have to be anyone. Her own story should be written by herself. After the male lead said this, Tai Mei also burst into a dazzling light. Seeing the pattern that only the beast god would have, the king also felt a little regretful. cursing himself for being so stupid before. The king had always opposed Tai Mei practicing martial arts. Just wanted Tai Mei to stay away from danger. But he didn't expect Tai Mei to be so powerful. Instead, he had buried his talent. And Hung Mao became more and more excited, because as long as he eats Tai Mei, his stripes would belong to him. After defeating Hung Mao, Tai Mei fainted due to exhaustion. However, while Jinny was treating Tai Mei, Hung Mao's body mutated and stood up again. At first, Hung Mao was also a little confused and didn't understand why he was still alive. But soon he remembered. It turned out that, after defeating the Demon Lord with the other 6 heroes, Hung Mao had secretly eaten the Demon Lord's flesh. It seems that his current body, it was because he absorbed the power of the Demon Lord, that it changed. Ha ha ha. Seeing the little loli who suddenly appeared, everyone was a little confused, but Hung Mao recognized her at a glance, that she was the daughter of the Demon King. However, with only one head left, now only has the mouth to be stubborn. Before he could say a few more words, the little loli directly cast a common magic, blow the red-haired man into pieces. Then the male lead walked over. He greeted the little girl. Seeing that the male lead was still alive, the little girl was a little confused, but she didn't bother to care about it at this time. Then she rode her mount and left here directly. Seeing his slightly sad back, the male lead also planned to find an opportunity to continue writing his story. The next day, the male lead also planned to leave with Jinny. As for Tai Mei, prepared to follow her father's previous request, stay in the palace and be a good princess. However, what happened last night made the king change his mind and agreed to let Tai Mei go on an adventure with them. Hearing this, Mei was overjoyed, so she directly took off her skirt in front of the king and jumped out of the window to chase the male lead. On the other hand, the male lead stopped Mei Tai and Akuan, because Akun really didn't have the talent. The coffin, which made him feel really uncomfortable. Ha ha ha.